I've had a couple different grant projects funded by the Lilly Endowment where we've had the opportunity to work with pastors. And so I want to share this with you because it's something we've learned from our research and our work with pastors, is that pastors really need Sabbath. The project that we had before Creative Callings was called Sustaining Urban Pastoral Excellence. And your academic dean, Brian Stone, and I actually wrote a book out of that project called Sabbath in the City, Sustaining Urban Pastoral Excellence. And what happened, the book was really to document the pastor's own reflections about the importance of Sabbath in their life. The way it came up is we started off kind of offering them an enrichment leave as part of this grant project. Then we came to call it sabbatical, but we hadn't really thought about what sabbatical means and the root of sabbatical being Sabbath. And pastors shared with us a lot of how hard it was to have any kind of dedicated time for God, really. That their Sunday worship was leading worship, and that didn't necessarily feel restful, even though it felt important, but not restful necessarily. The constant needs of their congregants, again, they love their people, but how do you get rest? Where do you go? And there was one group from that project that called themselves Midwives of Sabbath to People in Trauma. There are 4 women pastors working in the Boston area, still are. And they came together and felt that that word Sabbath became really important to them, both to help them find more balance and rhythm and pace in their own lives, but also to think about all the people who never get a taste of Sabbath rest. And the people who are in pain, who are oppressed, what would it mean to offer some kind of birthing of Sabbath in other people's lives, creating access?
In today's vernacular, by which I just mean the way that we often talk about or use the term spirituality popularly, there is this tendency, and a lot of sociologists of religion have noted this, there is this tendency to talk about spirituality as an individualistic thing, a personal thing. So this is almost as if spirituality is to the individual what religion is to the collective. Religion is this collective social institution, and spirituality is the thing that's yours individually, the thing that's yours alone, the thing that is autonomous, the thing that is personal, right? So sometimes, especially when you have this language of this being spiritual but not religious, spiritual becomes sort of my own personal journey, unfettered by institutions, whereas religious institutions have institutionalized power, norms, systems of authority, but spirituality is where we go to escape all of that, right? That's sort of sometimes what I think we mean culturally when we talk about spirituality.
So one of the things I'm going to talk about is how in late medieval Christian mysticism, it's reacting to particular themes of its day, both engaging those themes, it's entangled in those themes, and also resisting certain themes of its day, as well as trying to name the gaps of what's going on. So it's very contextually shaped. So for example, late medieval mysticism, if you look at the art of this period, you're going to see profound artistry around the crucifixion of Christ. So the Passion of Christ. This is like highlight of Christian medieval spirituality at this time. It's also then very deeply shaped by Eucharist and Eucharistic piety, because if you think about the Passion of Christ, in many ways that's also very, for the medieval church, very shaped by their understanding of what Protestants call the Lord's Supper, what Catholics at that time call the Eucharist, because a Eucharist is about that last meal that Jesus had with his disciples on the night of his death, and the promises that Jesus says in that meal. So late medieval mysticism is very much entangled in big theological concerns and questions of their day, of imitating Christ's passion, focus on the suffering of Christ on the cross, deeply Eucharistic, etc. And I'm going to do one example through Catherine of Siena to just unpack a little bit of that. But more broadly, if you look at it, mysticism, late medieval mysticism, is particularly engaging some emphases that are also at play in the history at that time and pressing against it, or at least, or interrogating it, or asking questions about what it's missing. So mysticism flowers from about 1400 to 1700. And what's happened just prior in the 1400s, so about 1000 into 1400 or so, 1500, you've got this movement within Christianity called Scholasticism. And that is a profoundly, very much about learning and knowledge and study. It's very male-dominated. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but that's just, it is. But what you might not know is that out of that, you've got you've got these monk communities who are collecting all the writings of the church, and forming theological libraries. And as the monasteries become theological libraries, they then become sources of places of education. So they actually become the first universities in the world, because learning comes out of that. So you've got this whole tendency of this collection of books and this schools of thought, and then cathedral schools come out of these, and the universities comes out of these. And so you've got this whole really profound emphasis in these couple of centuries on scholastic thought. What do I mean by scholastic? Like learning, erudite learning, you could call